My name is Nora Hale. I'm 35, a pediatric nurse who wears compression socks like armor and drinks hospital coffee like it's courage. I'm also mom to 10-year-old twins, Theo and Maya, the kind of kids who turn ordinary Tuesdays into science fairs and living room dance battles. 2 years ago, when my 12-year marriage to Daniel evaporated under the fluorescent light of reality, I packed our lives into 6 cardboard boxes and drove to my parents' house. It was supposed to be a landing pad while I steadied our finances and stitched together a new routine. My parents, Margot and Philip, said all the right things at first. Just until you're back on your feet. We're happy to help with school runs. Family sticks together. It sounded like grace. It felt like relief. If you're listening to this, drop a comment with where you're tuning in from and tap subscribe, because what happened next is the kind of family drama you think only exists in movies, until you're living inside it. Money-wise, the divorce wasn't just painful, it was surgical. Daniel, a software engineer with a stutter-free salary, had always been our financial anchor. I'd worked part-time for years to be there for the twins' pickups and pediatrician visits and fevers that knew the exact moment I had a shift. After the split, I went full-time, 12-hour rotations at the children's hospital, a schedule that 8 days whole. Shared custody sat on paper like a treaty, but the day-to-day felt like a war with logistics. My parents offered their guest room for me and the converted office for the twins. I bought groceries, cooked most nights, and told myself gratitude would drown out the history of uneven scales in our family. Because uneven was our native language. I was the reliable kid, the type who color codes calendars and returns library books a day early. My younger brother, Ryan, was the sun. He could light up a room or burn the curtains. He drifted through 2 majors, dropped out, then launched a tech company with our parents' money, and now posted photos from ski trips that looked sponsored by gravity. The old favoritism had become part of the wallpaper, so familiar you stopped noticing the pattern until the light hit just right. Theo and Maya adapted the way kids do when love is steady at the center. Theo has the kind of gentleness that makes teachers say words like thoughtful and old soul. He sketches robots on napkins and loses himself in cardboard inventions. Maya is the spark, first onto the soccer field, first to call out unfairness when she sees it. They were thriving in school, which felt like a small miracle housed inside a big mess. Then Ryan and Clara had a baby boy, Owen, and everything tilted. My parents didn't just become grandparents again, they became devotees. They turned the formal dining room into a nursery for when they visit, even though Ryan and Clara lived across town in a 4-bedroom with a yard and a swing set that belonged on a brochure. The registry arrived like a royal decree. High-end stroller, smart bassinet, bottles that needed a manual. Packages stacked in our hallway while my mother tisked the cost of Theo's inhaler copay like it was a luxury item. At first, I tried to clap along. New babies hypnotize entire families. I told the twins that newborns need more attention, that Owen's cries were small and honest, and that patience is a muscle worth training. But small things began to sting. Christmas morning brought designer monogrammed baby gear for Owen and practical socks for the twins. My mother cooed about how much Owen looked like Ryan had as a baby. She said it with an adoration that came salted with implication, as though my children were on loan from someone else's gene pool. I swallowed the bitter and called it holiday tea. I built a savings chart on the back of the bathroom door, drawing little boxes for the twins to color in every payday. We circled a date. By Christmas, we'll have our own place, I told them. We taped a key shape cut from construction paper to the wall and named it Hope. Spring arrived, not so much blooming as barging in with pollen and opinions. My parents became experts on my parenting decisions. Screen time caps, bedtime tweaks. They snack too much, they snack too little. Meanwhile, Ryan and Clara floated in on Sunday evenings an hour late to family dinners and left early with foil-wrapped leftovers, crowned by indulgent applause. If Clara wanted the living room TV, the remote delivered itself. If Theo wanted to show my mother a drawing he'd worked on for 3 days, he learned to wait until a commercial that never came. I kept my head down and took extra shifts. The numbers on the savings chart climbed, slow and faithful. I could feel the new life forming its skeleton just under our skin. And then Ryan called a family meeting, which is what he says when he wants to be both the breaking news and the anchor desk. He and Clara sat at the kitchen table with Owen dressed in a sweater that looked like it came with a trust fund. "Big news," Ryan announced. "Eyes on our parents, not me. We're finally starting the renovation. Full gut kitchen, new floors, knocking out a wall or two." "That's wonderful," my mother breathed, hands clasped like prayer. "We'll need a place to stay during demo, 6 to 8 weeks, maybe less." My father didn't even pause long enough to pretend diplomacy. "Stay here, of course. That's what family's for." I glanced at our already crowded hallway, at the twins' shoes lined like soldiers by the door. "We're a bit tight," I said carefully. "The twins share, and I'm on nights half the week." My mother's tone sharpened to a familiar fine point. "Nora, it's temporary. Family makes room." And just like that, my life became a folding chair in my brother's VIP lounge. They moved in the following weekend. My father assembled a portable crib with the enthusiasm he had never mustered for the twins' bunk beds. My mother cleared an entire closet for Clara's clothes, while I still lived out of suitcases because the dresser I'd ordered had become too bulky for the hallway. Changes arrived as a parade of minor indignities. Suddenly, the twins had to speak in library voices at all hours because Owen's napping, though he spent most days at daycare. Their sketchbooks and soccer ball, confined to a small basket by the couch, were declared visual clutter and swept into boxes labeled MISC. The TV defaulted to Clara's shows like it paid rent. One evening after a shift that left my feet throbbing and my heart threadbare, I found Maya on the back steps, counting jump rope skips under her breath. "What's wrong, Bug?" I asked. "She said I was too loud in the backyard," she muttered, eyes bright with angry tears. "But Owen was awake. Aunt Clara had the TV on loud. She just didn't want to hear me count." The next day, Theo came home beaming. His art teacher had chosen his design for a district show. He walked into the kitchen holding the announcement like a golden ticket. "Not now, sweetheart," my mother said without looking up. "I'm helping Clara pick curtain swatches." I watched his smile crack, quiet and clean. Something inside me hardened into a promise. That night, after the dishwasher clicked into its steady hum, I tried diplomacy like it might still work. "I get that Ryan needs help," I told my parents, "but the twins feel sidelined. It's getting to them." "Children must learn that babies take priority," my father said, as though reciting a truism carved into stone. "Not all the time," I said softly. "Not at the expense of everything else." My mother sighed, the sound of a verdict she'd been waiting to deliver. "You were always jealous of your brother, Nora. I thought you'd outgrow it." The word jealous landed like a slap I'd rehearsed defending my entire life. I let it sit there, ugly and untrue, and I didn't pick it up. From there, the slope got steeper. Ryan began rearranging the kitchen for efficiency, which meant nothing was where we left it. Her laundry colonized the washer for days. Ryan started hosting watch parties without warning, the living room morphing into a man cave where the twins became ghosts at their own house. One Sunday dinner, my mother cooked Ryan's favorites. Rich, heavy, beige, with nothing the twins actually ate. When Theo quietly asked if he could make a sandwich, she called him ungrateful.
20 minutes later, Owen flung peas across the floor, to laughter and the kind of commentary reserved for baby geniuses. "He's exploring textures," Clara said, filming it for her stories. The twins and I swept the floor while compliments rained down on a mess we would have been scolded for making. The refrigerator told the story with brutal honesty. Theo's and Maya's artwork vanished overnight, replaced by Owen's daycare schedule and 20 near-identical photos of him in novelty onesies. "I needed the space," Clara said when I asked. "I didn't think anyone would mind." The twins retreated to their small shared room, and the public library became our after-school refuge. A coworker, Nina Park, noticed me wilting during a charting marathon and nudged. "Everything okay at home?" I told her more than I planned to. She listened, then said the thing I didn't know I was waiting to hear. "It sounds like your parents built a house where Ryan's family are permanent guests of honor and you're paying boarders. That's not sustainable." The words landed like a rescued breath. On my lunch break, I called my friend Jess, who sells houses like most people sell Girl Scout cookies. "I need options," I told her, "sooner rather than later." We started touring rentals between shifts, me in scrubs, hair pinned up, heart pounding. A small, slightly scuffed 3-bedroom popped up 10 minutes from the hospital and still in the twin school zone. It wasn't fancy, but when the afternoon light slanted into the kitchen, I could see our cereal bowls on that counter. The rent was a stretch I could reach. My application was approved on the strength of my employment and credit I'd earned the hard way. I signed the lease with a pen that shook. I didn't tell a soul, not yet. Not until the ground felt solid. Not until the key in my palm felt like a promise instead of a wish. I thought we had 3 quiet weeks left to coast. I was wrong. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of shift where the pediatric ward hummed like a beehive. 3 new admissions, a parent in tears in every third doorway, a toddler who refused his IV like a gladiator. I checked my phone on a 10-minute lunch I tried to convince myself was 20, and saw a row of messages that turned my blood thin. From Theo, "Mom, Grandpa and Uncle Ryan are moving our stuff." From Maya, "Grandma says we have to live in the basement now. This is so unfair." From Theo again, "Please come home." I called the house, no answer. I called the twins, no answer. I typed fast, fingers clumsy. "I'll be home as soon as I can. Stay together. I love you." I told the charge nurse I had a family emergency. She squeezed my shoulder and covered my last 4 hours without a lecture. Even so, it took nearly 60 minutes to hand off kids whose care plans were my second language. The drive home felt like trying to push a river back upstream with the hood of my car. When I opened the front door, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and triumph. Theo and Maya sat on the couch, their backpacks at their feet like they'd been expelled from school, not their bedroom. Their eyes were rimmed red. In the kitchen, my mother and Clara sipped tea as if the evening had arrived politely and asked for a seat. "What's going on?" I asked, kneeling so I could look my kids in the eye first. "They moved our things," Maya said, anger barely laced to composure. "They said Owen needs our room more than we do." Theo's mouth tightened, the way it does when he's trying not to cry. "Grandpa said a baby has to have the best room." "I hear you," I said. "Thank you for telling me." I walked into the kitchen and set down my bag. Why are my children's beds and clothes in the basement? "We needed to make adjustments," Clara said, like she was presenting Q3 slide 15. "Owen needs a nursery, and my job is fully remote now, so I need a quiet office." "So you unilaterally decided my kids belong underground?" My mother looked at me as though I'd missed the logical conclusion of a basic math problem. "They're older, Nora. Children adapt. Babies can't. Besides, our other grandson is here all day. Your 2 are at school." It wasn't just the cruelty of the sentence. It was the thoughtlessness, the assumption that the house functioned on the orbit of one tiny planet. "The basement is unfinished," I said, keeping my voice even because I'd learned that women lose arguments the moment they sound like they care. "It's perfectly fine," my father announced, coming in from the patio with Ryan right behind him. I put down old carpet and brought in a lamp. "Jack," the name almost slipped, I corrected softly. "Theo has asthma." "You're being dramatic," Ryan said with a shrug he'd been practicing since childhood. "We grew up tougher than this, didn't we, honey?" Clara nodded like a bobblehead in a car wash. I looked from one to the other, counting heartbeats. They had done it believing I'd rage and then fold. They had gambled on my dependence. I felt something ancient inside me, still. The decision came through clean. I walked back to the living room and knelt between my 2 kids. "Pack your bags," I said, a smile I actually meant tugging at the corner of my mouth. "We'll come back for the rest." My father barked a laugh, but there was a wobble in it. "Don't be ridiculous. No one is asking you to leave." "You moved my children into an unsafe space without asking me. That says everything." Theo and Maya traded a look, then sprinted for the stairs. The thud of their feet sounded like a drumline. Clara straightened, voice syrup-sweet to disguise the steel. "It's a minor rearrangement, Nora. Don't turn it into a spectacle." "Would you call it minor if someone relocated Owen to a damp storage room without consulting you?" She opened and closed her mouth. My mother made a wounded sound. "We've given you a roof for nearly 2 years, and this is the thanks." "Yes," I said, "because gratitude is not a gag order. You did, and I have been thankful. I've also paid toward groceries, cooked 6 nights a week, handled school logistics, and cleaned up after watch parties I never attended. Still, you crossed a line." "You can't afford to be impulsive," Ryan said, a smirk crouching behind concern. "Rent's not a joke in this market." "That's handled," I told him. The stunned silence was a small private fireworks show. Even my father's posture shifted, the certainty draining out of him. "Handled how?" he asked. "I've been saving since the day I moved in. I picked up extra shifts. My credit is good. 3 weeks ago, I signed a lease." I didn't offer the address. Boundaries are also a kind of love. "You were planning to leave without telling us?" my mother whispered, her hand flitting to the charm bracelet she wears like a relic. "I was planning to give you notice next week. Today accelerated the timeline." I turned toward the hall. "Theo, Maya, ready?" They came down with backpacks and small tote bags, Maya clutching her clarinet case like a lifeline, Theo with his sketchbook and the fleece dragon that has slept at the end of his bed since he was 3. I remembered buying that dragon with Daniel, the way we joked about it guarding dreams. I pictured it glaring down on a damp basement like a tiny, fierce sentinel, and felt gratitude toward my former self for understanding the right talismans. "This is a mistake," my father said, his voice shifting toward the register men used to sound reasonable and feel obeyed. "You're letting pride get in the way of what's best for the kids." What's best for the kids is a home where they are not told in word and deed that they are worth less than their cousin. If you walk out that door, don't expect to be welcomed back with open arms. I met her eyes and felt something very old go quiet. I stopped expecting that a long time ago. Outside, the air felt fresher than it had in months, like the oxygen had just remembered its job. We loaded the car. Maya buckled herself in with a decisive click. "Are we going to our new house?" she asked. "Almost," I said. "We can't move in until next week." I reached for my phone and pressed the contact I'd hovered over all afternoon. "Nina?" I asked when she picked up. "Is your guest room offer still real, or were you just being the kind that sounds good over coffee?" "Real," she said. "I'll put clean sheets on the bed and pick up dumplings. How soon?" "Now," I said, the word landing in my chest like an anchor and a pair of wings.
We drove away with the porch light still on behind us, the house receding in the mirror, smaller than it had ever looked. The twins stared back for a moment, then forward. I took the long way to Nina's on purpose, past the park where Maya practiced corner kicks, past the library where Theo had hidden in dragons and galaxies, while the TV at home declared someone else's preferences sacred. At a red light, Theo said, "Mom?" "Yeah?" "Thank you." I swallowed, nodded, and drove. Nina's apartment smelled like sesame oil and lemon zest, which is to say, safety. She'd made up the guest room with a queen bed and an air mattress she called the Cloud. She handed the tweens paper boxes of noodles and let them pick a silly movie. After they were asleep, she poured me tea and didn't ask any questions that sounded like judgments disguised as concern. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "Feels like I jumped without checking the net," I admitted. "You built the net," she said, "one shift at a time." I slept like a person who'd turned off a buzzing light I hadn't realized was on for 2 years. In the morning, I called the hospital and used a personal day. My boss was supportive. She asked, "Family stuff?" "Yes," I said, "the kind that teaches you how strong you are." She chuckled softly. "That's the hardest kind." I drove back to my parents' house mid-morning. The air felt sharp. Autumn sliding toward winter. My father answered the door, again, his expression carved from disapproval. "You're back," he said flatly. "I told you I would be." Inside, the living room looked almost the same, except for the empty corners where the twins' things had hung. The house felt smaller, like our absence had taken up more space than our presence ever did. My mother was at the table, a mug of cold coffee in her hands, eyes rimmed red. "You really mean to go through with this?" she asked. "Yes," I said, setting down my bag. "We're moving on." "You're making a mistake," she murmured. "You'll regret cutting yourself off from family." "I'm not cutting us off," I said gently. "I'm creating boundaries. There's a difference." She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Boundaries," she repeated. "Is that what they're teaching you in those therapy books?" I smiled faintly. Maybe they should have. Upstairs, I helped Theo and Maya collect their last few belongings. Theo found his sketch of the key to our future, the one we'd drawn on the bathroom door chart months ago. The paper was a little crumpled, but the pencil lines were still bold. He held it up. "Should I bring this?" I said, "Yes, definitely," my voice catching. By noon, the car was full again. My father hovered by the door like a man standing guard over his pride. "You'll come crawling back," he said, "when things get hard." I met his eyes. "Maybe, but if I do, it'll be to visit, not to stay." He didn't respond, but his jaw flexed. That old Hale stubbornness refusing to concede even when faced with truth. My mother followed us to the porch. "Call us when you've settled," she said softly. "I will," I promised, because despite everything, I meant it. When we reached Nina's apartment again, I sat in the parked car for a long moment. Maya fiddled with her seatbelt. "Mom?" "Yeah?" "Are we really going to our own house soon?" I turned to her and smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, our very own." Theo, always quiet when something big was sinking in, whispered, "It's going to be okay now, right?" I said, "It already is."
That evening, after the twins had fallen asleep, I stepped onto Nina's small balcony with a cup of tea. The city hummed below, ordinary and alive. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for permission to breathe. 3 days later, the keys were in my hand. The house was small, a modest 3-bedroom with fading blue shutters and a backyard that looked like it had stories to tell if someone cared enough to listen. But to me, it was freedom incarnate. The walls were blank, the floors echoing, and yet it already felt alive with possibility. Theo ran from room to room shouting, "This one's mine!" Maya opened every window and let the autumn air in. I stood in the kitchen, sunlight spilling across the counters, and felt something inside me settle. We spent the first night there on air mattresses, eating pizza straight from the box. It didn't matter that the walls were bare, that our furniture was a week away. It didn't matter that the fridge was empty except for milk, juice, and a jar of pickles Nina had insisted we take. What mattered was the quiet, the absence of judgment, the space to exist without walking on eggshells. The next morning, we had breakfast on the floor, cereal and laughter, and the world felt right again. For a few blissful days, I didn't hear from my parents. Then on Monday, the calls started. Missed calls, voicemails, messages alternating between guilt and outrage. "You've embarrassed this family. You've broken your mother's heart. Please come home so we can talk like adults." I responded once, "We're safe. We're happy. I'll reach out when I'm ready." And then I turned off my notifications. At work, I felt lighter, more focused. My supervisor noticed. "Whatever's been weighing on you," she said, "it looks like it's lifting." I smiled. It is. That weekend, the twins and I painted their rooms. Maya chose soft yellow, like sunshine that doesn't burn your eyes. Theo picked pale blue and taped paper stars to the ceiling while I held the ladder. As I watched them, I realized something that made me tear up mid-brushstroke. They were smiling again. Not polite smiles or nervous ones, but real, unfiltered joy. We slept soundly that night. The house creaked a little, the pipes groaned, but the silence afterward was the sound of peace. The next day, my parents showed up unannounced. I had just returned from dropping the twins off at school when the doorbell rang. My father stood there, suit jacket over one arm, my mother clutching a pie like an offering. I almost laughed. "How'd you find our address?" I asked. "Your Aunt Elise," my mother admitted. "She thought it would be good for us to talk." I let them in, but the power dynamic had shifted. They sat on my new couch, cheap, comfortable, mine, and looked around, assessing. "It's smaller than we expected," my mother said. "It's perfect for us," I replied. My father got straight to the point. "We want you to come home, Nora. Enough of this drama." "This is home," I said evenly, "but you're welcome to visit." My mother frowned. "The children need their grandparents and their uncle. They need to feel safe and respected."
I said. "When that happens, you'll always be welcome." "We've always loved them," she protested. "Love isn't about words," I said softly. "It's about how you treat people." They stayed nearly an hour, circling guilt, bargaining, regret, but for once, I wasn't the one shrinking under their tone. When they left, I felt calm. No shaking hands, no need to cry into a pillow later. Just quiet certainty. For the first time in years, I didn't need their approval. I had built something stronger than that. My own peace. Weeks turned into months, and the house began to feel like a living thing, warm, imperfect, real. The walls that had echoed with emptiness now carried the laughter of my children. There were crayons on the dining table, mismatched mugs in the cabinet, and a slow-growing plant in the kitchen window that Maya named Hope. It was small, but it was ours. By December, our routine had settled into something beautiful in its simplicity. I worked the day shift now. My supervisor had approved my request after a colleague transferred to another unit, and it meant I was home in time to make dinner, help with homework, and listen to Maya practice her clarinet before bed. Theo's asthma had improved noticeably, and his teacher emailed me one afternoon to say, "He's drawing again during free time. Whatever you're doing, it's working." Those words made me cry quietly in the hospital break room. Because what I was doing wasn't magic, it was peace. And peace, I had learned, was oxygen. My parents had kept their distance for a few weeks after our last visit, but eventually they began to test the waters again. Texts, small gestures, invitations. It was almost endearing, if not for the years of silence it took to reach this point. Then one afternoon, my mother called and said, "Your father and I want to host Christmas dinner this year. We'd love to have you and the children come. It would mean a lot." I hesitated. My instinct screamed to protect the peace we'd built, but the twins missed their grandparents, even if they couldn't quite say it aloud. "We'll come," I said finally, "but only if it feels right." Christmas came with snow, laughter, and hesitation. The house looked the same as when we'd left it. Same photographs on the walls, same scent of lemon polish, but there was a shift in the air. Ryan and Clara were there too, of course, with baby Owen now toddling around with sticky fingers and bright blue eyes. My father greeted me with a stiff hug, the kind that feels more like a peace treaty than affection. My mother was effusive, almost overly so, fluttering between the kitchen and the living room, desperate to keep things light. Dinner went better than expected. My parents asked about the twins' school projects and complimented Theo's artwork. Clara, perhaps realizing the wind had changed, was noticeably quieter than usual. Ryan, too, seemed deflated, humbled somehow. When he mentioned that their renovation had gone wildly over budget and that they were tightening belts, my father winced, but I simply nodded politely. I wasn't gloating. I was just done comparing lives. After dinner, when the kids were playing in the living room, my mother sat beside me at the table, her hands wrapped around a mug of cocoa. She said, "I've been thinking a lot," she said, "about everything that happened." I studied her face, the lines etched deeper, the eyes softer. "You were right," she continued. "We treated you unfairly. I didn't see it then, but after you left, the house was so quiet. I realized how much you did, how much I took for granted. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was something, a first stone laid on the road to repair." "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." She smiled faintly. "Your father's trying too. It's not easy for him to admit when he's wrong." "I know," I said, "but he doesn't have to say it in words. Actions will do." When we left that night, there were hugs that felt real for the first time in years. Maya waved from the car window, and my mother stood on the porch, hand pressed over her heart. For a brief, fragile moment, I believed healing was possible. January brought change again. At work, a position opened up for charge nurse of the pediatric unit, a role I had once dreamed about but never dared to apply for. My colleagues encouraged me to go for it. "You're already doing half the job," Nina said. "Might as well get paid for it."
I applied, interviewed, and 2 weeks later, I got the call. The promotion came.
I smiled, blinking back tears. I didn't really have a choice. Sometimes, she said softly, the hardest choices are the ones that show who we are. Spring came early that year. The air smelled of rain and renewal, and I found myself looking at our home differently. It wasn't just a rental anymore. It was a promise fulfilled. Every wall carried a piece of our journey. Every sound, the twins' laughter, the creak of the floorboards, was proof of survival. One morning in April, a for sale sign appeared 2 streets over. It was a cozy 3-bedroom brick house with a small garden and a front porch swing. I visited on a whim, just to look. The sunlight poured into the living room, landing in golden pools across the hardwood. The realtor handed me a flyer and said, "It's priced to sell quickly." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next morning, I called a mortgage broker. My credit was good. My savings had grown since the promotion. For the first time in my life, homeownership wasn't a fantasy. It was within reach. When I told the twins, they went wild. Maya immediately began sketching plans for her dream room, complete with a reading nook and fairy lights. Theo asked if he could paint the walls sky blue. "We'll see," I said, laughing. "Let's take it one step at a time." Within a month, my offer was accepted. The day we signed the papers, I brought the twins with me. "We're really doing this," I whispered as we stood in the empty living room. The walls echoed back the sound of their laughter. "Can we call Grandma and Grandpa to tell them?" Theo asked. "Yes," I said. "We can tell everyone." When I called my parents that evening, my father was quiet for a long moment before saying, "I'm proud of you, Nora. Buying a house on your own, not many could do that." It wasn't an apology, but it was enough. My mother cried, of course. "You've built such a beautiful life for yourself and the kids," she said. "You should be proud." I am. And for the first time, I truly was. The day we moved in, friends from work came to help. Nina brought takeout and balloons. My father carried boxes. My mother unpacked dishes. There was laughter, music, and a sense of belonging that didn't rely on permission. That evening, after everyone had gone, the twins sat on the porch swing, their legs dangling, the sunset painting their faces gold. "We did it, didn't we?" Maya asked. "We did," I said, sitting between them. Theo leaned against my arm. "Can we stay here forever?" I smiled. "As long as we want to." For the first time in years, forever didn't sound like a wish. It sounded like home. The day we moved into our new house, the air smelled like rain and sawdust, and everything felt possible. The paint was still drying in some rooms, boxes were stacked like small mountains, and the lawn needed cutting. But the moment we crossed the threshold, I felt it. Peace. Not the quiet kind that hides under fear, but the solid kind that comes from standing your ground. We spent the first weekend unpacking while music played from a small speaker on the kitchen counter. The twins danced around the living room using packing tape rolls as pretend microphones, and I watched them and realized how far we'd come. From the suffocating silence of my parents' house to this bright, messy, joy-filled home. Every laugh was a declaration that we'd made it. When evening fell, we ate pizza on the porch swing. My mother and father had come to help during the day, and to my surprise, it hadn't been awkward. My father had spent an hour inspecting the new plumbing, muttering about good craftsmanship, while my mother wiped kitchen counters and occasionally blinked back tears. They were trying, and that was enough. When the sun dipped below the horizon, the twins went inside to watch a movie. My parents lingered on the porch, the soft hum of cicadas filling the silence. Finally, my father spoke. "You've built a good life here," he said, almost to himself. "I know," I said quietly, "but I had to prove it, to you and to myself." He sighed, rubbing his hands together. "I was wrong about a lot of things. About how I raised you.
about what mattered. His voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry. The words landed heavy, real. I hadn't expected them, not from him. My chest ached, but it was a good ache, the kind that comes after holding your breath too long. Thank you, I whispered. My mother reached for my hand. We don't deserve forgiveness, but we want to be part of your lives again, on your terms this time. I squeezed her hand gently. That's all I ever wanted. The three of us sat in silence for a while, the night cool and forgiving. It wasn't the perfect reconciliation of movies. It was quieter, imperfect, human, but it was enough. Over the next few months, life fell into a rhythm that felt like healing. The twins thrived. Maya joined the advanced band and began playing solos at school concerts. Theo entered an art competition and won first prize for a drawing he titled New Beginnings. The school displayed it in the hallway, and when I saw it, I had to step away to catch my breath. It showed three figures, me, Maya, and Theo, standing on a hill, looking towards a sunrise. Behind us, a shadowy house stood small and distant. The caption beneath read, "We walked away and we grew wings." That night, I framed the original and hung it in our hallway. Every morning, it reminded me that leaving wasn't running, it was rising. My work flourished, too. As charge nurse, I found myself mentoring younger nurses, many of them struggling with the same work-life balance I once fought to maintain. I taught them not just about medicine, but about boundaries, the art of saying no without apology. You can't pour from an empty cup, I'd tell them, and no job or relationship is worth your peace. One evening, after a long day at the hospital, I came home to find my mother sitting on our porch swing with the twins, reading a storybook. It was a sight I hadn't imagined possible. Laughter without tension, warmth without guilt. When she saw me, she smiled. They were teaching me how to make their favorite pancakes. Maya grinned. Grandma still flips them too soon, but she's getting better. I laughed. She always did that. My father came by later with a small tree sapling wrapped in burlap. It's an oak, he said awkwardly. Strong roots, long life. I thought it should be planted here. We dug the hole together in the front yard. Theo held the flashlight, while my father and I packed the soil around the base. Every family needs something that lasts, he said as we finished. I realized he wasn't talking about the tree. By summer, the branches had sprouted new leaves, and the house no longer felt new. It felt lived in. Our days were filled with the small, sweet chaos of normal life. Late-night snacks, messy art projects and weekend hikes, and pancake Sundays. Ryan and Clara, meanwhile, had separated. It wasn't something I celebrated, but it didn't surprise me. My mother told me one afternoon that Ryan had moved into an apartment nearby and saw Owen on weekends. He's learning humility, she said quietly. Maybe we all are. Owen came to visit during one of the twins' weekend playdates. Maya shared her soccer ball with him. Theo built him a paper airplane. Watching them together, I realized something had changed in me too. The anger had softened, replaced not by forgiveness exactly, but by peace. The twins noticed it too. One night, Maya asked, "Mom, are you still mad at Grandma and Grandpa?" I thought for a long moment. "No," I said finally. "I was, but being angry forever would mean they still controlled my happiness. I'd rather use that energy to love you two." Theo nodded. "So we can visit them more?" "Of course," I said, smiling, "as long as it feels good for us." 6 months later, I hosted our first family dinner at my house. My parents came early, bringing flowers and my father's famous lasagna. Ryan showed up too, surprisingly humble, carrying Owen on his hip. The twins set the table while I lit candles and turned on soft music. Dinner was lively but calm, a far cry from the tension-filled meals of the past. Ryan complimented Maya's soccer trophies and Theo showed him his art ribbons. My mother passed around her homemade pie, her laughter gentle instead of forced. At one point, my father leaned back and said, This is what family should feel like."
I caught his eye and nodded. "Yes," I said. "It is." Later that night, after everyone had left and the twins were asleep, I stood on the porch, looking up at the stars. The oak tree swayed gently in the breeze, its branches stretching higher than when we first planted it. I thought back to that night in my parents' living room. The arguments, the tears, the moment I told my children to pack their bags. It felt like a lifetime ago. Back then, I'd thought I was walking away from family, but I wasn't. I was walking toward one that was built on respect, love, and choice. I whispered a quiet thank you to the universe, to my children, to the version of myself who had dared to leave. Inside, Theo stirred in his sleep, mumbling something about dragons. Maya murmured the word home. I smiled. "Yes, baby," I whispered. "Home." Because that's what we finally had. Not the kind of home built from obligation or guilt, but one built from courage, boundaries, and love. The kind that takes years to find and forever to lose.